Hey guys, so today we're doing an SC430 2001 to 2005 going into a 2000 to 2001 US IS300, and it's retaining the 5-speed automatic gearbox. So let's get into it. Right, as I said, this is an SC430 01 to 05 going into a US IS300, but the 2000-2001 model, and retaining the automatic 5-speed gearbox. So, as per usual today, what we're going to be doing is first going through the layout of the harness so we can see exactly where everything goes and plugs in. Then we're going to go to the testing part, which is made up of two sections, one with the ignition on and one with the engine actually running. So as you can see on this harness, it is an adapted harness. What I mean by that is we've taken the customer's original SC430 harness and we've basically stripped it down, cleaned it up, repaired what needed repairing, replaced what needed replacing, and obviously adapted it to be plug and play into a IS300. All right. So first thing we're going to do is let's cut through to the photos of what it takes to convert this harness to be plug and play. Right, so there you go. As you can see, obviously we strip the entire harness down. We obviously go through everything and add in what needs added in to make it plug and play. Okay, right, so as I said, we're going to start with the layout, and we're going to start right here at the ECU itself. Okay, so this is your ECU box that goes in the engine bay. What you'll notice is the 2000-2001 US IS300, so this is a one-only vehicle, had a rectangular shaped ECU, not the wedge shape like you got in the 3UZs, or the 01 to 05 IS300s, or in the US's case, the 01 to 05 GS300. They all had the wedge-shaped ECU, okay? So, in order to fit this, there's a couple of ways of doing it. One, you can either get your hands on an 01 to 05 IS300 ECU box, or a GS300 01 to 05 ECU box, because they had the same wedge-shaped ECU. If you can't get your hands on that, you basically pull out the 4 screws there and there, there and there. You pull out the PCB of the ECU, you then grind this lip off, and then this slots straight down into there. Okay, so plenty of options available to you there in order to get that to fit down in nicely. Right, so moving on to the ECU itself, we have 5 connectors, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. These are all unique. You cannot plug them in the wrong place. Do not stress about that at all. They'll only go in one section. Okay. Moving along from there, we then have our interface. So in other words, these are the 2 connectors that are left behind in your IS300. There is a 26-pin one, which we don't use. That can be tucked away underneath and forgotten about. Okay. Coming along here, we then have our little tacho converter, which is this little thing over here. Okay. Now, that converts the 4-cylinder signal from the 3UZ to the 6-cylinder signal that's required for the IS300. These are adjustable, so you can remove the 4 Allen key screws there. Get underneath there, there's a little pot resistor, use a Phillips screwdriver and just adjust it as you want. I do it here with the laptop with GTS, so the diagnostic data. I can see RPMs and I adjust it here to the best of my ability, but obviously my clusters are not inside a vehicle, so I'm kind of trying to guess what your viewing angle is going to be. So by all means, you can pop that open, adjust that to fine tune it for your setup, okay? Right, then coming along here, we have 3 body plugs over here. Okay, again, these are all unique connectors. You cannot put them into the wrong place, and inside the vehicle they go there, there, and then there. So that one goes in that one over there. Okay, obviously this looks like a bit of a mess because I'm converting from IS200 to a US 2001 IS300, and that applies both for the ECU connectors and the body connectors over there as well. So obviously it is a bit of a mess. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut to a photograph of what it looks like when everything's nice and neat inside there. There you go, fantastic. Okay, so now you can see what it looks like when you obviously finally put your ECU box lid on and block everything away. Right, so coming up to the end here, we then have our grommet, which slides in there. You have a junction connector, which can just slide in over there. No dramas there. Moving along from here, we then have the harness, which goes up and goes into a piece of plastic here, obviously routing everything. It says 2 mounting points there and there. So just 2 bolts, 10mm socket on there, and that'll get those done. All right. Now then, first section that pops out over here is going to be injector 1 and coil 1. All right. So while I'm here, quickly so you know, with the 3UZ, 1UZ engines, the way that you can name this or number the cylinders is obviously looking from the driver's position. So looking at the back of the engine. This is the left bank because this would be your left-hand side, and that's going to be cylinder 1, 3, 5, and 7. The right bank, because your right-hand side, is going to be 2, 4, 6, and 8. So that is how the cylinders are numbered on these particular engines. Okay. Right, moving along from there, we pop over to here, and a bunch of stuff's going to come out the front here. First of all, you have your oil control valve for the VVT-i. So again, this is what's advancing and retarding the cam via oil pressure. Then coming out there, we have our TPS sensor. Now, obviously, this is a 3UZ 5-speed model. So unlike the 6-speed models, which I have a throttle here, which has the big 6-pin plug over there, you have 2 separate plugs. You have the 4-pin TPS and you have the 2-pin plug for the actual drive-by-wire motor. Okay. Moving along from there, it's going to break out and pop over to the cam sensor at the front. Now remember, on the 3UZs and the 1UZ VVT-i, they actually have 3 cam sensors. This one picks up a single tooth on the front for engine position. So obviously the ECU knows when to fire for fully sequential ignition and injection. And the other 2 that are in there, they have a 3-tooth trigger on the inlet cams. And obviously what they're doing is they are then looking to see what the ECU is commanding. So obviously it's using the oil control valve to command either advance and retard on the cam, and those can then measure and make sure that you are actually seeing on the engine what the ECU is commanding. So that's what those ones do. Okay. Right, moving along there, you then have a clip there and a clip there. Obviously, excuse mine are just designed to be easily removable. But it's going to pop down here and it's going to break out here at the top. So remember, on your vehicles, you're going to have your aircon pump right here. And on the SC430, you're going to have just a single 3-wire plug that goes in there. So you can use the aircon. No problems at all. That just plugs straight in. One thing to bear in mind, though, with the SC and the LS is basically the pressure sensor on the AC system never went to the ECU on just the LS and the SC, okay? The GS, it did go to those. Now, these are the first generations with the 5-speed I'm talking about. We're not going to get involved with the 6-speed later generations. Again, that's slightly different, okay? But what that means is that basically, because we don't have access to the AC system, which we just can't make it plug and play, the ECU will always think that the AC pressure is okay. So I must warn you guys to make sure that obviously you have regassed the system and you are happy that the pressure is okay, because the pump will turn on as soon as you command it from inside the vehicle. Okay, again, obviously nothing really we can do. The pressure sensor would go into the car and actually communicate with the climate control ECU. It has nothing to do with the engine ECU at all. So the best we can do is obviously part of the remap is we take the signal from the car itself when you press the AC button and tell the ECU, go for it, pump the aircon, okay? Next one that pops down there is coming down here and it's going to the oil pressure switch. Now remember, you SC430 and GS430 guys, you have a front sump. You LS guys, you need to swap over to a front sump. Now your oil filter housing actually makes this switch face backwards, which is why the oil pressure switch breaks off here and not down at the bottom here like it does on an LS, okay? So this can go through this hole here around the back of the aircon pump and plug into the oil pressure switch, which again in this case would be facing backwards, all right? But that's that section over there. And then lastly, popping down there, which goes through that little hole over there, you can see it over there, and pops over to the crank sensor, okay? So again, everything is individual plugs. You really can't get it wrong. You just got to remember to do this. You can push this through and bring out the other end with the aircon pump in. I've done it hundreds of times. So again, if you've got the aircon pump on already, don't stress about obviously getting that in. It's easily doable. Okay. Right, so moving along from there, small little section where it's obviously not covered with the plastic, and then we move into the second piece of plastic that's holding everything together. 2 mounting points, boom and boom, exactly the same as the front two, 10mm socket, get them all done. Okay. First section that breaks out over here is going to have injector 3, coil 3, the cam sensor for the left bank, and your evap solenoid. Okay. All right. Now, all of the evap stuff in that is actually remapped out of the ECU, so you're not going to get an error code for it, so you can just tuck this away if you want. But if you have the vacuum solenoid valve here, when it comes to the IS200-300, you probably realize you've got that little vent that comes up with a little black box. So you can connect that to that and plug that in, and it will operate as usual. You just won't get an error code if you don't plug it in. Okay. Moving along to the second breakout point here, you're going to have injector 5 and coil 5, and you're going to have the noise filter. So you should have 2 of these on your engines, one on this side and one on that side. Okay, and that's what these are. They're basically capacitors, and they're designed to take any sort of electronic noise that's created by the injectors and coils. So this is basically the 12 volt that feeds the coils, and the injectors also goes into that capacitor there. Okay. Moving along from there, the last section that breaks out is going to go to coil 7 and injector 7. Okay, nice and simple there. So as you can see, they kind of dictate where they go by how they come out. So you're not going to be able to reach that one all the way over to there and vice versa. So again, really, really simple when you are plugging them in on the engine itself. All right, let's move around to the back here. You'll see another little section that pops down over there. We have the big piece of plastic that runs across the whole back of the engine. Again, only 2 mounting points. One you see down there, and one over there. So that's it. Again, exactly the same as these two and exactly the same as those two. 10mm socket, and you're away. Okay. Moving along down from there, we then have the section that breaks out the bottom here. So in this case, we have first of all the earth strap. So that's going to bolt on there. Again, that's an M6 bolt, so 10mm socket. That will then tighten that down. What you can do as well is before you tighten it down, grab some emery cloth, just give it a nice good rub in there to make sure you have a really clean surface that the harness is earthing to. Toyotas do love earths, and they like clean earths. Okay. Next up, we then have our pedal connector. So again, this is designed to go through the firewall, and it plugs into the accelerator pedal. In this case, the customer has provided a pedal. So this, he has the big 6-pin connector on there, and that's going to go directly inside the vehicle. Okay. Then coming down here, we then have our Lambda sensor for the left bank. Okay. Obviously, part of the remap, we've removed the secondary Lambdas, so the ones that go behind the catalytic converters, so they're no longer used, and you won't get any codes obviously showing on the ECU for them, which you'll see as part of the running test of the engine. Okay. Then lastly, popping out the back here is going to be the gearbox section. So we've got the selector, which goes over that side. Coming down here, we then have the solenoid plug and the output speed sensor, and also popping out down this section over here is the input speed sensor of the gearbox. Okay. Right, then coming along here, we have our sub harness that goes underneath the intake, and that goes to the 2 NOx sensors, and that pops out here and plugs into the back of the harness over there. Also obviously includes the main starter cable, which then bolts to your battery. Now obviously, as is a US car, it would be left-hand drive, which is why the wire actually goes that way, because the battery is going to be on that side of the vehicle over there. Okay. Right, so also what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut to a photograph of what it looks like underneath there. So there's your overall picture where everything goes. Then we go down by the starter motor, and you'll see the starter plug that plugs in over there. Then you'll see NOx sensor 1, and you'll see NOx sensor 2. Okay. Right, so as you can see there, we've obviously had to remake the NOx sensor wiring because the wires usually get very, very brittle. And I think in this case, we had to replace the connectors as well. Anything that goes inside the middle of the V-bank is obviously going to get extremely hot, and so those will all go brittle over time. Same thing applies to the injector plugs. So we're tending to see now with the even with the 3UZs and the 1G VVT-Is, we need to replace a lot more of the injector plugs as well, because obviously all the heat from the middle of the engine comes straight into the injector plugs there. Okay, right, so that's this section at the back. Let's pop over to the other side and carry on over there. Right, fantastic. So goes along here, little pop out down here. It goes to your second earthing point. Again, M6 bolts, 10mm socket, bomb. And again, give it a clean with the emery cloth to make sure you're getting a really nice clean earth. Moving along to here, we then have the end of the plastic, and out pops injector 8 and coil 8. That's the only thing that's come out here. Moving along there, the next breakout point, you have your ACIS vacuum solenoid valve connector. I do have a good video on the ACIS system and exactly how it works and what it does. So again, I put all the links down at the bottom of the video, a bunch of cool technical videos that I've done for you guys to look through. And also coming out there is injector 6 and coil 6. You'll see on this fuel rail, there's 2 mounting points there. So you're more than happy to get yourself some P-clamps and just mount the harness there so it stays nice and sturdy. But moving along there, we then have this breakout section, which has the second noise filter. Again, that goes over there. We then have the cam sensor for the right bank. So again, this is the one that's measuring the angle of the cam for the VVT-i. We then have injector 4 and coil 4. Moving along from there, we have a breakout here, which is quite a few things. So let's start with them. First of all, we have the throttle motor plug. So that's the 2-pin plug over there. We have the coolant temperature sensor plug over there. We have our oil control valve for the right bank over there. We have injector 2 and coil 2. And then lastly, popping out there, we then have our mass airflow meter. Now, with the mass airflow meter, just make sure you get the correct mass airflow meter that matches your ECU. The SC and the GS have ones with like a 45-degree angle. The LSs have the one with the straight ones. This is LS1, the other ones go from there. So again, if you're doing an SC430 or a GS430, you want that angled up one. If you want a nice, easy way to find out whether you have the correct mass airflow meter for your ECU, the best thing you can do is Toyota DIY, pop your ECU part number in. That'll then get you the correct vehicle. What you can then do is then go to the air cleaner section, because it includes the air box, and in that diagram you'll also have the mass airflow meter, and you can compare part numbers and make sure you have the correct one. Okay, right, moving down from there, we then have the section that pops down here, and it goes to the alternator. So there's a 3-pin plug for the alternator. We then also have the Lambda sensor for the right bank. So that just slides in there. You should have a little clip on there as well that just slides into. And then you have the low oil level. So as I said, with all these swaps for IS200, 300 and Altezza, you need a front sump for them. You cannot use the mid sump like this. This will be when people start doing the 3UZ swaps into IS250s or 350s. They use that sump. So this engine will bolt into an IS250 as long as you have the 3rd generation GS430 engine mounts. This engine would drop straight into an IS250 with this sump and everything correct. No modifications, just GS430 3rd generation mounts, pop straight in. Okay. Right, so as I said, you'd have a front sump, which means your oil level sensor would be there, and that would obviously be plugged in over there. So the sump's right here, and you just plug it in directly over there. Super simple. Right, so that's the whole engine harness gone through. Really nice and simple and straightforward. As you can see, everything just makes a big U shape. If you don't have the engine inside the car, it should take you about 25 to 30 minutes to have this whole engine harness on. Okay. Right, so other things that you're going to need to connect. Number 1, as I'm on this side here, main cable for the alternator. Obviously on a left-hand drive vehicle, it's really nice and simple. You basically go from there, boom, to the fuse box that lives here, and that's where your alternator goes. I'm going to show you on the other side what it looks like, because obviously it has the same fuse box, just inverted. But that is where you bolt your alternator to. That's really important. That then goes through a 120 amp fuse, which means if your alternator cable was to ever get burnt on the exhaust for some weird reason, or scratched or ripped or something on those lines, it would blow that fuse before obviously the cable set on fire. So again, strongest advice, connect your alternator over there. The only one that doesn't go through a fuse is the main starter cable, but obviously that's a nice short run to the battery. So again, anything happening to that is very unlikely, but especially if you've got a right-hand drive vehicle, you're running the alternator wire all the way underneath the subframe over there, a lot of potential for things to go wrong. On a left-hand drive, not so much, because you're going from there to there, but remembering that you are going to have to go close to the exhaust. So again, please make sure you do connect that there. Okay. Next up is going to be earths. So basically the earths that you have on the engine, I'm just going to go back around this side because obviously right-hand drive vehicle is going to be easy. Obviously the left-hand drive is just the inverse of what I'm showing you. So you've got your main earth cable that goes from your battery underneath, bolts to the chassis, goes down, and then I think you can see it dangling there. There it is. That's the one that goes to the block. Okay. If you want, you can put a thicker cable on, not really a major issue, but that one should be fine to again bolt directly to your block. Then you have these extra bolt holes here on this side and this side here. Now in an IS200 300, you had a bolt here that ran along the vacuum sort of metal pipe that ran for the brake booster. Obviously on the left-hand drive, you don't have that pipe there, but you should have an earthing point here. So you can run an earth cable from there to that cylinder head over there, and you can just use that M8 bolt over there. Bosh, done. Okay. Then lastly, on your gearbox, there was an earth braid. So in other words, not an insulated wire, just like a flat earth braid that went from one of the gearbox bolts to the chassis leg. So again, those are your standard Toyota earths that you want to fit onto this engine. Okay. So basically, only other things on your side is going to be the alternator cable and the earth, which is obviously already there. And again, you should have all of that braid when you pull the 2JZ out. But yeah, bolt all that back on again. Okay. Right, so that's it for the layout now. So what we're going to do is we're going to pop away. We're going to get ready for the testing of the engine harness, starting with the ignition on. So let's see you in a second. Right, so now we're back for the testing of the engine harness. As I said, made up of two sections, one with the ignition on and one with the engine running. First thing we're going to do is go through all the tests, tell you what they are, why we do them, and what the result we're looking for. Then we'll jump in straight to the testing with the ignition on. Okay, so with ignition on, we want to check the ambient temperature. So all we're going to do there is we're going to go over to our climate control. We're looking to make sure that it's measuring the outside temperature. Because of the standard ECU, that signal is actually being fed to the ECU and it is measuring it. So it will go up and down as the outside temperature goes up and down. Then we're going to come back and we're going to look at the cluster over here, and we're going to be looking for the check engine light, the charge light, and the oil pressure light. Okay, so you're going to want to make sure that the check engine light's there, the charge light's there, the oil pressure light's there. I have removed the low oil level because obviously I use this cluster for a bunch of different harnesses, but that does work as well. So you should see the low oil level light come on and obviously go off when you're driving. Okay, in this case, reverse is not applicable. Okay, oh, sorry. Speed is not applicable, reverse is applicable. Now what I've actually done is I need to do the IS300 cluster to do that. So when it comes time to that, I'm going to cut to a video I've already done, just showing you with the IS300 cluster that when it reverses, we get the buzzing noise there. So that's just to confirm that obviously the wiring inside the car is correct. Okay. Then we're going to do OBD2 tests. And what I mean by that is obviously you can see my laptop is plugged into the OBD2 port inside the vehicle. So again, because the systems are the same in terms of communication for diagnostics between the SC and the IS300, everything is wired up correctly. So you're going to plug in a diagnostic machine exactly as you would if it was a standard IS300. Nothing fancy there at all. Once we're inside here, we can start carrying our tests. First thing we're going to do is obviously we can test the fuel pump relay. We can test the AC clutch. So again, what we're looking for is we're going to test to make sure that obviously the little relay down here in that box over there clicks when I tell the ECU to turn on the AC pump. Okay. AC request, we're going to look at the live data, and what we're basically going to do is pop over to here. We're going to press the AC button, and you're going to see the AC signal or AC signal there is going to go from off to on. We'll press the button again, it'll go from on to off. Again, as part of the remap, we're making sure that the MPX data between the vehicle and the 3UZ ECU is correct and working. Okay. Then we're going to test the brake switch. Now, in this particular case, we don't have a relay on the harness because an IS300 always had a 4-wire brake switch. Okay. So again, that's making sure that that works correctly. So all I'm going to be doing now is basically imitating pressing the brake switch, and you're going to see brake switch, stoplight switch go from off to on, and then on to off again when I disconnect it. Okay. But obviously inside the vehicle, you have the two signals that are working, and that is completely standard. Okay. Then we're going to come back and we're going to go to the gear selector shifter wiring. So all I'm going to basically be doing is I've got an IS300 cluster here. So I have all the gear positions down there. So effectively what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the selector here, like what will be happening on your gearbox. And we're going to go from park, reverse, neutral, drive, 3 and 2. Obviously it's a 5-speed gearbox. Now to test the 4 and the L, which I'll go through a bit when we go through it, but to test the 4 and the L, I'm going to go back over to the ECU box and I'm going to artificially feed 12 volts. Because obviously inside the vehicle, your shifter would be feeding the 12 volts for 4 and L, okay? And that's what I'm going to be testing there. Oh, and just so you know, with the brake switch and everything connected, and because this is running automatic gearbox, the cruise control is also going to work as well on these particular setups. Right, so that's with the ignition on. So engine running, we're going to test the starter circuit, okay? So what I do with the autos is obviously I'm going to move it from park to reverse on the selector here, and we can see on the dash. I'm going to turn the key. You're going to see nothing's going to happen. It's not going to start. I'm going to move it back to park, and then we're going to turn the key, and you're going to see the engine is going to fire up. So it's making sure that the park neutral switch is working correctly, and the vehicle will only start when it's in either park or neutral, okay? ACIS. All we want to see on this particular test is that this valve goes from here to here. So it should happen a few seconds after it starts. You may even catch it in the camera as I'm sort of walking around to come and show you from there. Drive-by-wire test, super simple. 3UZs are complete drive-by-wire. I'm going to walk over there. I'm going to rev, press the accelerator pedal down. You're going to hear the engine rev up. Then we know the drive-by-wire system is working correctly. Oil control valve test. It's something I can do in GTS/TechStream. Basically what's going to happen is you're going to see I'm going to test bank 1, I'm going to test bank 2. Every time I test them, you're going to hear the engine run really lumpy. And then as soon as I have the test off, it's going to go back to normal idle. And again, same for bank 2. Okay. Then we're going to do injectors and coils. So basically what I do is I haven't actually clicked all the injector plugs on. They're just pushed on as far as they can go before they click. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around obviously single-handedly and remove every single injector plug so we can see that the engine is misfiring as we go through each cylinder to make sure that every cylinder is firing correctly. Okay. Side note with the 3UZs, make sure that if you are looking for misfires, don't be disconnecting the coil plugs. And the reason I say that is because with the 3UZ ECUs, if the ECU picks up a coil misfire, it shuts the injector off, okay? So if you're looking for misfires with the 3UZ, your best bet is to do the injectors, not the coils, okay? Then we're gonna look at the tacho. So again, we're gonna look at the tacho, make sure we've got a signal over there. If I can twist this around and go over to the pedal, I will do that. Give it a bit of a rev so you can see it going up and down. Coolant temperature, again, part of the remap. The reason I test the coolant temperature is it's one of the bits of MPX data that needs to be translated from 3UZ to IS300. So again, we want to make sure that hopefully by the time we come to run the engine, the coolant temperature isn't in the middle, obviously, but we should see where it starts out and then we'll see where it rises up to, okay? So normally when I do the sort of testing with the check engine light, charge light, and oil pressure, you can kind of see where the temperature gauge is. And then by the time we get down to here, you'll see it's obviously changed and gone up as we've run the engine. And then lastly, we're going to go into diagnostics, how you do it, what you can do, etc. as well. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump into testing with the ignition on. And that obviously requires turning the ignition on. Plug and place, you should be able to put your key straight in and off you go. So first you want to test is the ambient temperature. And you can see there it is 12 degrees. So again, it is reading. Obviously, if you're in America, it's going to be Fahrenheit. We're in Europe, it's degrees Celsius. But yeah, that will actually work and do correctly. Right, then we're going to do check engine light, charge light, oil pressure. Let's pop over here. We've got check engine light, charge light, oil pressure, and you should have the yellow one for oil level as well. Okay. Then moving down here, we are going to go to reverse. So I'm going to quickly cut to that video now. Right, so here is the quick little reverse test. So as I said, I'm plugged in the IS300 dash because it's got the actual buzzer inside. So it's going to tell me whether the wiring actually into the vehicle, so aka making the reverse lights work, does actually work. So obviously we're in park. And there you hear the buzzer. And off she goes. Fantastic. Right, fantastic. Okay, so you can see that that does work and the cluster does buzz when we put it into reverse. Right, OBD2 test, we're just going to pop in over here and you can see that it is actually communicating. Let me get rid of all of the data and go to my set piece of data. You can see that we've got 62 degrees. So you can see on the coolant temperature there, it is not all the way up, but it is there. We've got 16 degrees on the intake air temperature, a bunch of stuff that we're going to be testing now that is in off position currently. Right, so moving down, fuel pump relay. Okay, now then, you'll see it says fuel pump relay and it says fuel pump. Lexus did a very weird thing with the way that they control the fuel pump, and it depends on which model you are dealing with. I've got a video down below explaining the different versions of how Lexus and Toyota control the fuel pumps. So if you want to understand why I have both fuel pump relay and fuel pump, and why I'm not using the fuel pump relay to test if the fuel pump works, it is all explained in that video over there. Okay, so I'm going to go on to fuel pump. You can see that. Right, I'm going to keep quiet now because I want you to hear the fuel pump clicking on. Fantastic. So again, ECU is controlling the fuel pump. Okay. So again, brings me nearly to the next part. The Toyota and Lexus vehicles do not prime the fuel pump. Remember, all these modern ones between the IS300 and the 3UZs, they all had a deadhead system. So there's one fuel line going from the tank to the actual engine itself, okay? What that means is all the non-return valves and everything are built into the fuel tank. So that little hat that has the fuel pump in, you've got a regulator in there, you've got a non-return valve, you've got the whole shebang. So basically what happens with the Toyota Lexus system is, what you'll notice if you listen very, very carefully, when you switch the key off, the fuel pump will run for a few more seconds after you switch the key off. Then with the non-return valve, it should maintain pressure. So if you have a look at the back here, you'll see that this screw is all the way up. There is fuel pressure there, enough to get the engine started on the next key start, okay? So if you leave a Toyota or Lexus for an extended period of time, then obviously that fuel pressure will eventually drain away. So you might find if you leave it for a couple of days, it takes an extra crank or so to start, but that is perfectly normal because they do not prime the fuel pump. People don't realize that the whole time they've had an IS300, 200-year-old Tesla, or a GS430, or a LS430, or a SC430, they don't realize that the pump never primed. The moment you come to an engine swap, they're like, oh, I turned the key on, I can't hear a fuel pump prime. But obviously you were never listening for it before, you just assumed that it was. But Toyota and Lexus do not prime the fuel pump. Right, so that is the fuel pump relay. So let's go on to AC clutch. So again, I want to go to AC magnetic clutch relay. Pop over here. I'm going to move the camera over here so you can hear the relay. Right, hopefully you heard that, but it definitely did go off there. Okay. That's AC clutch. Now we're going to move on to AC request. So we need to go back over to our live data. And let's get rid of all of the mess of data there. Right, so we're looking for AC signal. So I'm going to highlight that quickly there. At the moment it is off. We're going to pop over to our switch here. You'll see that's now turned to on. Pop that over there. And it's gone back to off. Okay, just a side note as well, the AC idle up does work when you press the AC button. So remember that, so when you do press the AC button, your idle will pick up. That's how obviously standard Toyotas work. So because the signals are being communicated from the car to the ECU just fine. But remember, with the LS and the SC430s, because the pressure switch for the AC was not fed to the engine ECU, as part of the remap, we just make the ECU constantly see that the AC has correct pressure. Okay, so you do need to be careful and make sure that when you pump up, before you use your AC system, go and get it regassed to make sure that it is absolutely fine. And if you start seeing the performance degrade, go get it done before that, because if the AC pressure is not in spec, the computer will still tell the AC pump to carry on working. Okay, so please guys, just make sure that you are keeping an eye on that. All right. Right, brake switch. So again, we'll go over here. We're just going to highlight stop switch. Get rid of that one. So as I said, I'm going to imitate someone pressing the brake in the car by giving this wire 12 volts. Let's see if that's in enough. Yep, there you go. So brake, stop light switch is on. Oh, fumes in the workshop. And it is back to off again. Fantastic. Okay. Now then, let's go to gear selector shifter wiring. You'll see I also make sure on the ECU and that all of this is correct. And this brings me to the reason why I did the weird thing with the reverse. And that's because this gear position over here indicator is communicated by MPX. It's not physical wires coming into the vehicle that's doing the gear indication. So the reason I had to plug in the other one, ISO cluster, and put it in reverse to make sure that it beeped, was because the way that this one works is a physical wire coming from the engine on into the vehicle. It goes up to the cluster to make the buzzer work, but that's the same wire that goes to your reverse lights. So I cannot be sure that the reverse lights are working unless I plug in this one and listen for the buzz. But now let's pop over to this one over here. So at the moment we are in park. If I move that down there, we're in reverse. See, no buzzer in the IS300 cluster. Then we're in neutral. Then we're in drive, okay? Now then, as I said, I would explain earlier. With the 3UZs, they never had selective gears. So you cannot shift up and down with the steering wheel like you can on the IS300. And I think the GS400 had that, but the GS430, they scrapped that whole design, okay? So what that means is now, when you have the swap in your IS300, you have to basically assume that when this manual mode button comes up, that is not what it means. It is not in manual mode, it is in 4, okay? So basically, I'm gonna come down over here now, And I have to artificially supply it effectively. But I think this one is going to be 4. I'll try and squeeze that down in there. Oh, hang on a second, right. Let me just grab the cluster here. I'm gonna have to hold this in place. Okay, we should be able to see it there. Right, I am going to artificially provide 12 volts to the wire that should put it into 4. Oh, no, that's L. Sorry, my bad. This is 4. So now you can see the M manual mode is popped up with no gear position because obviously that's incorrect. You must assume that M is now 4, okay? We'll take that away and we go back to D. What I might do is just do the rest of the gear position from here because I need to do L as well. Alright, so let's move this over here. Right, so now we are in drive. So let's move over to, that's 3, that's 2, and obviously that's the mechanical positions done with. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give L 12 volts, and you'll see 2 disappears and L lights up. Okay. There's something I want to show you guys quickly in relation to this as well, which is really, really important, okay? At the moment, we're in 2, okay? And I'm going to move to 3. Now, if I ever so slightly tilt this, now you can see there's absolutely no gear position indication to the ECU whatsoever. This is a problem. The ECU doesn't like that, okay? So what you'll notice on these little selectors here is there is an elongated hole, okay? So you can adjust this. Now, obviously in this case, it's gonna be super easy to do because basically you can just take it over to drive. You see drive is another one as well. You see, so if I do that, if I just ever so slightly twist this, I can lose the signal, okay? So the best advice that I can give you is get it set up, put the ignition on, go through the gears, make sure that they all light up correctly. Then what you want to do is, on your own private test track, you want to get outside, you want to put it in drive, and you want to boot the car. Right, that's going to twist the engine, it's going to twist the gearbox, and if you are on literally a millimeter away from going from a gear position to no gear position, that's what you're going to see inside your vehicle. If you have that, then you're going to loosen that bolt, and you're going to adjust it slightly, and you're going to keep testing it. What you want to make sure is if you get in the car, you turn the ignition on, you start it, and you boot it, that D doesn't disappear, okay? Because then the ECU is going to have no gear position. It's going to go, whoa, something's desperately wrong. What the hell is going on, okay? So just make sure that you do that test when you first install it, because you don't want to end up in a situation where you are having to chase your tail because it's doing all types of weird things, okay? Let's go back to park. Right, so that is the testing with the ignition on. I'm going to quickly pop away, get everything prepared like my ear defenders on, and we'll come back and do the test with the engine running. See you in a second. Right guys, so back for the testing with the engine running. So a quick recap. Start a circuit, which is going to make sure that it only starts in park or neutral. ACIS, check the valve at the back, drive-by-wire, press the accelerator pedal, oil control valve, do the test on here. Injectors and coils, remove each injector one by one so it misfires and goes back. Tacho, make sure the tacho is working. Coolant temperature, make sure that's going up. So at the moment it's sort of just above the needle, so hopefully it climbs a bit more. And then diagnostics go through there. Okay, so as I said, we want to make sure that it only starts in park or neutral. So first of all, we're going to move it to reverse. We're going to turn the key, nothing. Move it back to park and fantastic. Okay. Right, so start a circuit, ACIS. Perfect. Drive-by-wire test. Fantastic. Oil control valve test. So let's go into active test. start here. So number 8, number 6, number 4, number 2, go to number 7, number 5, number 3, and number 1. Fantastic, so that's all done. Taco, you can see it there. Pop around. Fantastic. Okay. While I'm here. Fantastic. Coolant temp. That's gone up, so that is fantastic. And let's go into diagnostics quickly. Right, okay. So now then, into diagnostics. So you'll see here we've got diagnostic trouble codes over there. Obviously, we haven't got automatic gearbox connected up, so we're gonna have a bunch of codes for the solenoids. So let's just wait for them to populate quickly. There you go. So we've got transmission fluid temperature sensor circuit, 1, 2, 3, 4 solenoid, SLU, SLT, and SLN. Okay. But what's very important is we don't have any other codes. We don't have any codes for secondary lambdas or anything like that at all. Okay. So obviously, like I said, in this case, the check engine light did stay on, but that's obviously because of these codes, which will disappear as soon as you plug into the automatic gearbox. Okay. Right. So for diagnostics, with the 3UZ, especially with US and European models, there is no old school bridging 2 pins and the check engine light starts flashing and you can read all the codes. Doesn't happen, okay? You have to use some sort of software, whether it's a handheld device, whether it's TechStream, whether it's GTS like I use here, which again, this is actually available to the public. You could just go on and pay like €7 for a day, and you have access to the full diagnostic suite that any Toyota dealer would have. You can also subscribe for like, I think it's 1 day, 15 days, and then like whatever, and then a whole year. Okay, and then you'll have access to any Toyota and Lexus diagnostics with that subscription. Okay, now just because you can't read the codes by flashing the check engine light doesn't mean that that little process doesn't actually do anything. Okay, so on the IS300 200s, you all have an OBD2 port inside the vehicle itself. This side for a right-hand drive, this other side for a left-hand drive. Basically, it's by the driver's side. Okay. Now, what you can do is you can bridge pin either 4 or 5, because 4 is a ground, 5 is a ground, and 13 is TC or trouble codes, okay? Some vehicles, which maybe the IS300 2000, 2001 might also have as well, is one of these little diagnostic ports at the front here, okay? And inside there, you'll see populated, we have E1 in this top corner here, and you'll see there in the, right here in the middle here, we've got TC. So you could literally bridge this with a wire, and you would get the same result, okay? That'll put the vehicle into diagnostic mode. Yes, it's not gonna flash check engine light codes to give you whatever, but usually on IS200, 300, it'll start flashing like ABS or VSC codes, etc. But what it does do, which can be quite useful, is it does actually lock the engine timing at 10 degrees, okay? So what that means is, if you've got a timing light, you can either put it around the wires, if yours is sensitive enough to pick up there, or you can get a old-fashioned spark lead, push it into the spark plug and push it into the coil, and then wrap your clamp around there. And then you can measure 10 degrees of timing. Obviously, let me see if I can see. I've colored in the wire, the little space there. See, I've colored it in with, I call it Tipex from South Africa, but I think you guys call it correction fluid. That's what I basically use there. I just use correction fluid to make the numbers nice and bright, and obviously the marking on the crank so you can see it nice and easily. But yeah, if you're having a weird issue and you think your timing is out, you think maybe you slipped a tooth or something on one of the cams, you can basically bridge those 2 pins, get a timing light, whack it on there, and if you are not at 10 degrees, but you're slightly off, then at least you know the timing is incorrect, so then you can start pulling all the covers and everything off and then verifying it from there. So again, if it's you want to do a quick dirty check, that is a really, really nice, easy way to do it, okay? So yes, you can check base timing, I suppose is the best way to say. You can check base timing to see if you've got 10 degrees actually on the engine by bridging those 2 pins. That's pretty much all you can do there. The rest has to be done via diagnostic software, whether it be a handheld device that you plug in and use an app on your phone, or whether you use TechStream or GTS like I use here. Okay, but yeah, so that's how you do diagnostics. As I said, this particular setup here, everything is running exactly as we expect it to. Again, if it's all plugged in as we've laid out here, you should have absolutely no problems at all. Okay, so done here, super happy with everything. We'll cut to some photos of what we received and what we changed it into as well at the end for you guys if you want to hang around and watch that. But again, if you guys have any questions about anything, please don't hesitate to pop a question down below. I try and get to as often as I can. Or you can email us at info@Phoenix Engine Management. You'll get an auto response explaining how to better contact us and which particular email address to use. Okay. Right, but thanks for watching, guys. See you again soon. Bye-bye.